Nod-Krai. I can't believe that it has already been so long since that trailer dropped, or that we are just a step away from Snezhnaya. It has been a hell of a year with so many reveals, so many long awaited characters, and so many twists and turns. So let's take this step by step and look at the good, the bad, and the pretty of Song of the Welkin Moon. Speaking of that trailer, with all those old and new characters coming together, my excitement was through the roof when I saw it. And I've also watched it more times than I'd like to admit, but that's another thing. But despite my excitement, I was also rather worried. Genshin was setting so much to happen within a single year. How were they going to tie up so many themes, characters, and storylines into one cohesive narrative? Which brings me to the best part of this year of Genshin, the story. I can't express how impressed I was, not only that they managed to pull off their mad plan to intertwine all those different storylines and characters, but also that they explained in the main story so many things that were previously cryptically hidden among different notes, books, and NPC lines that many people probably didn't even bother reading. I'm talking about the lore of the Moon Sisters, Nibelung, the Funerary War, and much more. And despite them adding all of this in the main story, the written lore is still there, which means for lore loving people like me, there is still more to explore after the voiced quests are over. But anyway, returning to the actual story, I loved pretty much all of it. The reveals, the cutscenes, and the mixing of different myths and legends to create an absolutely magical lore behind the Fae. It especially impressed me how much of the darkness that has always existed on the Vat was also allowed to be shown during the actual Archon quests. And on top of that, there were multiple really serious and heavy topics that were explored quite openly. I am talking about the feeling of being worthless and even the desire to self delete. This is a story for another time, but for me, fantasy has always given me strength. I don't know if the stories shown in Genshin have helped anyone, but the simple fact that they tried to explore this is worthwhile in my book. And how can I forget how epic some of the cutscenes were? I mean, I loved so many of them so much, and my heart almost stopped in so many places. But to be honest, I can talk about the story for hours, but I do want to keep this review as spoiler free as possible. So let's leave it at that and look at the characters. Not surprisingly, the characters were masterfully done as well. I won't talk much about the lore since I'd be saying pretty much the same things I said about the story. But you can also see my videos about Flints or Ogre Birds where I talk about so many things. Nor will I talk here about their gameplay. That is simply because I am already really weak at fighting in games and I just try to have fun. But the characters themselves, their designs and animations, and their role in quests and the world itself, Genshin has always had good designs, but they've been improving consistently year after year. I still can't get over Columbina's walking and jumping and her little cool hanky wings, or Sandrone's animation of her looking at a picture of Polonia, and so much more. There are so many details, and I feel like I can always find something new. I know that this technically started before Nod-Krai with the anecdotes they introduced, but the VAT feels more and more alive. Since Nod-Krai arrived, you can even meet characters in the wild, and not only for anecdotes, but just random interactions that often caught me off guard. And if you have a certain character, you can also have extra conversations with NPCs that show how these characters actually interact with the world around them. And speaking of NPCs, the models have improved so much. It was really fun to just look at all the different factions, both in Nod-Krai and in the other new regions. The animals, the plants, the puzzles, and the changes of environments based on your story progress. Not to mention the variety you could find both visually and mechanically just in the Temple of Space, let alone in general, left me in awe. And can I just say, we got to explore the literal moon. I still can't get over that. And finally, this is a given. I mean, but I do have to include it as well. Obviously, the music has been amazing. I mean, when has Genshin disappointed when it comes to music? There were so many great pieces, but my favorites were definitely Columbina's Lullaby, the epic soundtrack at the Kuvaki Experimental Design Bureau that reminded me so much of The Witcher, and the first angel's voice. And I've probably forgotten so many more, so tell me what I've missed. Music is not my strong suit. And with so many things, and I believe I've probably missed quite a few things here and there, I feel a bit sad saying goodbye to Nod-Krai, but at the same time, I also really can't wait to see what they do in Snezhnaya as well. But before that, now that I have praised Genshin so much, it is time to talk about the things that could have been better. And first of all is the dailyfication of the game, or weeklyfication. I don't understand this. They removed the daily quest chains from previous nations, but then made so many other things time locked. Nico's weekly quests, the separation of Durin's story quest into 5 parts that you have to do in 5 different days, and worst of all, Columbina's weekly Selenic Chronicles that you even get locked out of if you progress until a certain point in the Archon quests. Look, I've played online games for a long time. My first online game was actually World of Warcraft back when it came out in 2004. And daily quests, logins, and simple tasks, I can accept that. It makes sense both for the game provider and the gamer. Live games need people to log in often so they can show that the game is doing well and to also make sure that people will keep returning to the game. And players get a small reward for just a couple of minutes of simple gameplay. I am not against this. But what I can't get behind is the literal story getting time locked, especially when we already have to think about anecdotes that appear randomly and the other daily requirements, as well as Stygian Onslaught's artifact farming from time to time, and to temper thyself, and so much more. There are all kinds of people who play Genshin. Some people log in every day for a little bit, others have one solid chunk of time during the week and want to experience everything then and there. Everyone's schedule is different. So I really hope that this is not going to be a trend in Snezhnaya as well. Then the other thing is the introduction of so much content that is locked behind specific characters. Now, if I'm being totally honest, I am still rather conflicted about this. Because having certain interactions with NPCs and getting all those extra quests does make the characters feel more alive, more part of Genshin's world. However, it also means that if you don't get a specific character, you are now potentially missing a huge chunk of content. And I mean not only NPC conversations, but whole lore books, new appearances for characters, and literal voiced quests. When I started Genshin, I was so thrilled that everything in terms of story, pairing the character and weapon profiles, was open to anyone. All the stories, zones, everything. And this has been changing little by little. And yes, I know that Nahida is a very old character that also unlocks lots of NPC thoughts in Sumeru, but it was not Cry when all those world quest chains, teapot collectibles, voiced meetings between characters, and so much more appeared. And finally, Miliastra Wonderland. I will start by saying that I am not a huge fan of this game mode. I had fun with it for an hour or so in the beginning, and then couldn't bring myself to open it even for Primogems. But that's not why I've put it in this section. I know that many people enjoy it, and so many people have poured their hearts and tears and sweat into creating amazing things there. And that is great. The bad thing is that it felt like it was constantly pushed onto players. There was a period in which every single time I opened Genshin, the exclamation mark for events was on, and I think, oh, what's new? And it was just Miliastra. And nothing new about it either. It just repeatedly nudged me to go and do their event. Again and again and again. Just tell me once and then let me decide, please. But enough about this. Despite everything, Song of the Welkin Moon is still one of my favorite expansions. So let's end on a good note by looking at something beautiful. Genshin has always been breathtaking, and Nod-Krai is definitely not an exception. My personal favorite is Hisi Island, where you can find the Frost Moon Scions, but there are so many beautiful places and such variety as well. From Lempo Isle and the Krumkake craft shop to the place where the first angel's voice can still be heard, and then on the other side of the vat, Dorman Port. And how can one forget about the domain of space or the literal Frost Moon? But words are just cheap in the face of such beauty. So let's just take one final look as we prepare for Snezhnaya.